On today's show, I am joined by my friend Wes Morton of Peachtree Hoops, talking about the Atlanta Hawks through 25 games this season. In short, nobody is thrilled with the Hawks right now at 13-12, but because they are 13-12, they are still right in the thick of things in the Eastern Conference. We'll cover all of that, the Dejounte Murray injury, and more coming up.
You are Locked On Hawks, your daily Atlanta Hawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, friends. Welcome to episode 1365 of the Locked On Hawks podcast. I am your host, Brad Rowland, coming to you on a Thursday. It's December 8th, and today's show is brought to you by LinkedIn. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the most qualified candidates that you want to talk to, and they help you do it faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNBA. And as you can see, if you're watching on YouTube, if you can, not you're about to hear, if you're listening somewhere else, I am joined on the podcast by my friend Wes Morton. Hello, sir. How are you?
Brad, I'm doing all right. How are you doing?
Hawks fans are overjoyed at this moment in time. The vibes are just immaculate right now with Hawks fans. It's been a long couple days. We're recording this show, as I said before, on Thursday in between the two games in New York. And unfortunately, that comes with an injury update, actually. So I normally would do this without my guest on the podcast, but Wes knows the deal. Dejounte Murray now has a confirmed left ankle sprain, according to what the Hawks announced earlier today, with some associated swelling. He's going to be out approximately 2 weeks, is what the Hawks said. That was reported as such earlier in the day by Shams, and his return to play will, of course, be updated as appropriate as it is with every single Hawks release. If you do the math on this one, Wes, if Dejounte were to miss exactly 2 weeks, which I definitely always stress, do not assume he's only going to miss exactly 2 weeks, but if he does, he would miss 7 games. How big of a deal is this? We saw how kind of shaky they look without him on Wednesday. Then we'll kind of go from there. But obviously, not having your second best player for at least 2 weeks is not great.
Yeah, definitely not great. Yeah, I'm sure it'll be exactly pinpoint precision 7 days, or 7 games. But yeah, I mean, it's they're gonna have to make an adjustment. I think you pointed out, like, it's pretty clear last night against the Knicks. You know, when Dejounte went down, they were scrambling to figure out how they were going to rotate guys in. Aaron Holiday immediately came in, but, you know, do they stick with Holiday next to Trae to start, or bring him off the bench? You know, who comes in after Trae when Trae sits? You know, I believe Trent Forrest is questionable for the Brooklyn game tomorrow, so he's a possibility at point, or some sort of kind of point hybrid role. You'd probably have to play him with like Aaron Holiday or someone just for the extra ball handling. But yeah, I mean, it's a tough blow. Obviously, Murray's been kind of, you know, obviously when Trae struggles, he's having some games where he's struggling shooting wise. You know, they can get the ball to Dejounte. He can do some of the same things and run the offense and run a pick and rolls and things. And, you know, that's just not something you trust Holiday to do or Forrest to do. Those guys are like off ball guys. Those guys are connectors. So, you just got to get the most out of your Trae minutes. You may have to stretch them out, you know, play him 36 minutes a game or something like that. And, you know, defensively, you're also losing one of your premier wing defenders on the team. Maybe you get DeAndre Hunter back. I saw he was questionable, so that could help on the perimeter. But they're also missing John Collins, so Hunter may have to play the 4 more. He won't be out on perimeter in the same way. So, yeah, they're just going to have to figure out the right rotation. Like I said, I think the answer is to play Holiday with another guy, whether that's Forrest or whether that's, you know, Bogey, who's come back from injury, but he can handle the ball. You really don't want to have Aaron Holiday as just your straight backup point and not give him another ball handler in the lineup. So they'll have to – it may take a game or two to kind of figure out the right rotation for that, but – I mean, regardless, it's a big loss. Like you just can't lose a guy like Murray and think you're just going to keep it rolling.
Yeah, I mean, part of the whole theory of this roster, as we've all discussed for months now, is that, you know, they're playing all 48 minutes with one of those guys on the floor. They've been staggering them since moment one. Barring a couple of like early exits for injury purposes, they literally have had every competitive minute of the season with either Trae or Dejounte, and now they can't do that for a while. And they don't have a guy on the roster that really fills that role. Like I think they will use Aaron Holiday, like you just said. I think Nate is going to default to him. He's got experience. He is obviously point guard sized and has played point guard in his career, but he's basically been a wing on this team. There is the added benefit of having Bogey back for some extra ball handling. Bogey, I think, is still going to be on a minutes restriction as of this weekend. It might go up a little bit, but it's not like he's full go, ready to play 35 minutes a night either. And without Hunter, it would be even more challenging. Hunter is questionable, like you just said, along with Forrest. If Hunter's able to play, that makes life a little bit easier on Nate because he could just kind of play AJ at the 2 more often, have the ball in his hands a little bit more. That's a little bit more doable. But without Hunter, that means you got to fill 30 plus minutes at the 3 somewhere, with Culver and Griffin and whatever else you have. And it is definitely challenging. They tried to lean on Jalen Johnson a lot on Wednesday, and then he just fell out of the game in 15 minutes. That's not going to happen every night, but he can give you a little bit of ball handling. But clearly, it's patchwork and having at least 2 starters, maybe even 3 starters out for Friday. But obviously Collins and Murray both are out for a little while longer. The way that I put it on Twitter today was like, look, even if you step back from, and you and I are going to dive into kind of what the team's been so far this year through 25 games, but if you kind of step away from that and just think, all right, this roster as it is right now, if you just take Dejounte Murray and John Collins off this team, they're not very good, man. Like the roster's not very good. And that's part of the deal with a long NBA season. But depth was already a question. And if you take off 2 of your 4 or 5 best players at the same time, and that's before you can get to Hunter, there's not a lot of teams in the league that would be great to set up for that. But the Hawks, I think, are even more penalized by it because of their lack of depth and also just lack of creation besides Trae.
Yeah, that's definitely true. It's something I pointed out. I mean, the depth is, they coming into the season, they're definitely not as deep as they had been the 2 previous seasons. They didn't really go much beyond 9 or 10 guys deep. So especially you lose 2 of your starters, possibly a third. They had some guys like kind of been in and out of the rotation. Guys you thought were going to at least come off the bench every game. Justin Holiday has had his moments when he struggled, and you're relying on a lot of young guys. I mean, you think about obviously AJ's a rookie. He's going to have his good games, he's going to have his bad games. Last night he didn't shoot so well, but you got to just rely on that guy to play through those ups and downs. You got Jalen Johnson, who's functionally a rookie. Didn't really play much last year, so Kongwu's kind of in his second season and sort of the same vein. He didn't play a lot in his first year. Vit Krejci, second-year player, didn't play too much with the Thunder. So you're relying on a lot of young guys. That's just going to give you like a lot of kind of variance in how they play. They're going to have some great games. They're going to have some not so great games, but the Hawks don't really have any options at this moment. Like you said, you take away Collins, you take away Murray. Like this is just not that good a team. This team's looking at the lottery if you're missing those guys the whole season.
Yeah, I mean, at a minimum, I think you might be hoping for like the 10 seed if that was your actual roster, and that's with a lot of credit to guys like Trae and Clint for being really good. Because otherwise, the roster. All due respect to guys like Culver and Vit Krejci, but those guys are not like rotation guys right now on a good team. They're just they kind of have to be right now because of where the Hawks are. So I'm not sort of at the expense of doing a full-fledged Nets preview for tomorrow. The Nets are actually super healthy, which is not great for the Hawks. Everybody's going to be there. Kevin Durant's going to play. Kyrie Irving's going to play. Ben Simmons is going to be back. And if you were drawing up an opponent in the lab to not want to play right now, it's probably having Kevin Durant on the other side. Now, granted, if Hunter plays, that would be helpful, and he might go because he's questionable. But if he doesn't go, I'm not even sure how they even deal with Durant. I think you're going to obviously see some combination of like Culver and Justin Holiday, maybe even Jalen Johnson for size, but like they don't have any great options on KD because nobody does, but especially because obviously it would be Hunter if Hunter is around, but I'm not sure he's going to play.
Yeah, it's not a great opponent to go against. The Hawks are already, pretty small as is, and Durant has definitely torched the Hawks in the past, and he torches a lot of teams in the past. But yeah, they're not particularly built for this. I mean, just kind of gotta. You may have to honestly rely on a lot of kind of zone defense, to be quite honest. The Nets. One thing about the Nets is they're very centralized offense around KD and Kyrie. You can kind of hide guys on a Royce O'Neal or sometimes a Ben Simmons. Those guys aren't high usage. They're not going to really look for the shot. So you can kind of, maybe you play like a zone, you maybe try to shade your defense, you toss a lot of doubles at get the ball to KD and Kyrie's hands. But yeah, if you're looking at trying to counter KD with the Justin Holiday or Jarrett Culver, like yeah, I don't really think you can have your expectations too high on for how well they limit a guy like KD.
Yeah, I think I saw, by the way, the Hawks are, as of this moment on Thursday evening, like an 8-point underdog in the game in Brooklyn, which is pretty substantial. Like, the Hawks are not going to be underdogs by that much most of the time if they are in any way healthy. And granted, it's not even a back-to-back, obviously, with no travel either from New York. Yeah. I mean, obviously, you have to cross town. But given that it's not a back-to-back, it's not a travel situation, and you're still a 8-point dog to a team. And Brooklyn's not, like, incredible. They've been playing better recently, but this is not like you're playing Boston or Milwaukee. It kind of paints the picture of what has been happening for this Hawks team. I mean, not to like totally ignore the Brooklyn game. Is there anything else that you want to point out about that before we move on? Because I feel like it's kind of a straight ahead game, and that we'll see what the Hawks look like personnel wise with Hunter. We'll see if they can make a shot, because obviously last night was a catastrophe in that regard. But anything you're like particularly searching for that Brooklyn game, other than just like to see how they compete?
I mean, it sounds kind of weird. I mean, so Brooklyn started very, very poorly defensively. Like they're near the bottom of the league. But like I said, I haven't really looked. The last 6-7 games, they've actually played pretty well defensively. They know they've been in the top 10, possibly borderline top 5. I think finding the role for Simmons. They tried him at like a small ball 5. It's not really his role. They've been starting Nick Claxton a lot. So you get Claxton and Simmons and Royce O'Neal and perimeter. They guard pretty well. Obviously the Hawks have had trouble stretching the floor, and we're going to talk about that in a little bit. But I think a lot of focus is on KD, and the other side of the court is a big worry as well. Like, how are the Hawks going to be able to score on a team when with a lot of good perimeter defenders? They got a couple good interior defenders. KD's got a lot of length. Like, 8-point dog sounds about right. It's kind of funny because the Nets, I believe, are 14-12. The Hawks are 13-12. Like, they're like identical in the standings, and yet, even with obviously taking into account the home court situation, like it's a big line, but definitely say it's justified. Like, it's like you kind of look at the teams and just don't think that the Hawks quite have the horses to really compete with this Nets team with getting all their stars healthy and playing well.
Yeah, that's well said. All right, we're going to zoom out in a second with some talk about how the Hawks have looked in the aggregate as well as last night in New York. But first, a word from our sponsors on the show today. Today's show is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. And these days, every single potential hire that you're looking for, like a high-stakes wager for your small business, you want to be 100% certain that you have access to the best qualified candidates available. And that is why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs lets you find the right people for your team. They help you do it faster, and they do it for free. I've had to hire a few times in the last couple of years. LinkedIn Jobs has been awesome for me. It's really easy to create a free job post at LinkedIn Jobs, and they have high-quality candidates that you need to locate the best possible hire. And then once you're set up, add the job in the purple hiring frame to your LinkedIn profile to spread the word that you're actually hiring. And there are simple tools like screening questions that make it really very easy for you, let's just say, to focus on candidates with just the right skills and experience that you need to quickly prioritize who you'd like to interview and eventually hire. Finish the year strong with LinkedIn Jobs, and finding the right team member is a key piece of doing just that. It's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires against leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find a qualified candidates that you're looking for and that you actually want to talk to, and they help you to do it faster, and they help you to do it for free. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNBA. One more time, that is linkedin.com/LockedOnNBA to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. All right, Wes, let us talk a little bit about just the general state of the Hawks. They are 13-12 at this moment. They have lost 5 of the last 7. They are 21st in offense and 13th in defense. That split has been a controversy all season long. Of note, they had the same record as last year, which, they ended up making the playoffs last year. But obviously, no one was thrilled about last season's performance. And notably, I would say they have a much worse profile. Like, their net rating is like 3.5 points worse right now than it was a year ago at this time. They had obviously last year was like COVID challenged in a way this year hasn't been. And they're also now entering a stretch, as they kind of did last year too, but with some serious injury questions with Collins and Murray. And by the way, they also traded 3 draft picks, including 2 unprotected picks, to get Dejounte Murray, only to have a team that through 25 games is probably worse than it was a year ago. So we'll get into like kind of where that goes. But what are your vibes like? I know I joked earlier about the fan base. It seems like things are quite negative for a team that is 13-12. I also understand why, because the most recent play has not been great, and clearly the offense is not firing on all cylinders.
Yeah, I mean, not gonna lie, the fives are pretty bad. I mean, sure, you know me, I'm still a fan at heart. I try to cover the team objectively as possible. You know, when I run for Peachtree Hoops, I try to be objective. I try to look at the game objectively, but still part of me that, I agreed with the rationale behind the Dejounte Murray trade, for example, but it's something where you've got to plan long term, like because you're trading picks. You're not trading a pick this year. You're trading picks in 2025, a pick swap in 26, and a pick swap and a unprotected in 2027. Like you've got to have a plan for long term. For one, Murray's going to be a free agent after the next season, so yeah. You would think the Hawks are going to have to go a little bit above and beyond, make sure you retain him to try to save face from that trade. And, that might command a large, almost max deal, if not a max deal. But as far as this season goes, like, I think the idea was try to be a more balanced team, try to get more defense. And like you said, the defense is 13th and the offense is 21st. Like, they kind of swung in the complete opposite direction. They've lost so many of their good offensive pieces. I think there's just a lot of inconsistency, and I mentioned it with the youth on this team. Sometimes that's good. You got a lot of young contributors, but at the same time, I think with everyone except for the exception of say AJ Griffin, who's a rookie, like we've been able to see in a pretty good window of how they started and where they're going. For the Hawks to be a good team, for them to raise their ceiling and, try to create this kind of long-term, competitiveness, you need to pan out your draft picks, like especially relative where you picked them. Like, so, you go back to say 2019 where you draft Cam Reddish, you trade up picks to get Hunter. Reddish no longer a member of the team, and Hunter just signed a long-term extension, but certainly he's playing decently well, but there's always questions about the value of that extension. Like, is he gonna match that? You got a guy like Kongwu and Jane Johnson. Those guys have been mixed in performance, so I think there's a lot of trepidation that the Hawks are out of this rebuilding part. They're not going to have a high draft pick. Like, don't really see scenarios where they get a top 10 draft pick going forward. They're always going to try to fight for the playoffs, and so either you got to really hit on them. So maybe a guy like AJ Griffin at number 16, you got to really hit on that, and that can raise your ceiling. He can be a contributor at a cheap price. If not, like the situation with the Hawks is, you're kind of looking at just a middling team. To be quite frank, like that's sort of the place you don't want to be in the NBA. If you want your team, you're a fan of the team, you want them to compete at some point. You don't want them to be middling. That's kind of a criticism of Hawks teams in the past.
I was going to say, if you didn't say it, I was going to say it. Obviously,
I figured you'd bring it up.
you and I have been around for a long time following this team, and like that was, other than not having a star, I think there were two main complaints about those Hawks teams that were perennial 4 to 6 seeds in that range, and it was number one, we don't have a superstar, and number two, what is this range? Like, teams don't want to be in that range. Now, granted, it's better than being like where the Wizards are, where they're like a perennial 10 seed. Like, that's worse to be in. But like, right. If you're the perennial 6 seed, perennial 7 seed, like, yeah, that's not the worst place to be. But part of the appeal of this was that it's supposed to be a little bit more high upside that when you have Trae on board, and now you trade for a guy in Murray. And I actually got multiple people today, and I think they were kidding. Talking about maybe the possibility of like tearing down in season and try to go for Wembanyama. And it's like, man, we're already here. It's 13-12. It's victor time. Yeah. No, I mean, they're not going to do that. Don't get me wrong. Barring some other crazy injuries, they're not going to do that. But yeah, it's definitely nearing that point now, at least in the short term, where all of the maybe somewhat rational fears of this rebuild are coming home, and that, where you didn't want to be is kind of where they are at this moment. And I think that doesn't close the door on the upside long term. And you do have a superstar in Trae, as we'll get to in a second. He's not playing all that well this year, which is part of the problem. But I don't know, man. Like this is kind of the season where you're prone to hot takes after 25 games. But I get it though. Like you said about the fandom thing earlier. Like if you're a fan, this is not the product that you want. In part because you almost rather be bad than this. And I think they're not choosing between those two things, but it can be maddening when you are just hanging around the middle and with no like end in sight. I think this team has more of a positive spin than that. So that's a positive thing, but like you can't rely on hitting on every single mid first round pick. Like they've had a lot of success in that 15 to 20 range from the draft, including AJ this year. But generally speaking, the guys that have to lead this are not those guys. It's going to have to be Trae. It's going to have to be all that capital they use on Dejounte, et cetera, in order to kind of swing higher. And through 25 games, they're like not on pace to do that. At least not for now. At least not for now. And part of the appeal of getting Murray now and kind of the all-in nature of that move was to win immediately. We could talk about all day long, like where they handicap themselves with the other moves, but they definitely kind of made an all-in move on one hand and then not on the other, and that's kind of doesn't really work. Short term.
Yeah, I mean, I can't let this go without mentioning it, but part of the vibes thing is, kind of the elephant in the room. What they traded for Murray, but they have to cut costs at that point, right? The ownership.
I should say they don't have to. Okay. They don't have to. They don't choose to,
but they've chosen to. And part of the issue is, okay, you trade a guy like Kevin Huerter, which at the time, both me, you, a lot of Hawks, analysts and bloggers and people who follow Hawks were like, this is not really too competitive a move. And then he's in Sacramento this year, having essentially a career year. That kind of contributes to that kind of like, the downer vibes, the poor vibes we're having in the fan base here. You're looking at like, well, we had Huerter signed to a cheap for his role, like long-term deal, 4 years. Kind of just gave him up essentially for first round pick and some marginal players. Like, what are we doing here? Like you're supposed to hold on to your young players and kind of have them grow together as they develop. And if you're selling that off for, financial reasons, like that's a tough pill to swallow.
Yeah, that's well said. Obviously, it's kind of incongruent in a lot of ways, and we've all talked about that. But it's part of the story of a season. Like they did this kind of perpendicular pass. I'm not even sure what the way to describe it is. Like on one hand you're doing one thing, and the other hand you're doing the other. Who knows? Okay, like from there, like the offense we talked about a lot, and I don't want to go down the entire rabbit hole here, but last night's game, the game in New York, if you're listening to this podcast later on, was an outlier even by this year's standards and how bad they shot the basketball. I said this on the show yesterday, but the only two guys who shot well from three, hilariously, were Vit Krejci and Jalen Johnson, who are two of the worst shooters on the roster. Those guys shot 3 of 3, and the rest of the team was 3 of 33 from 3-point range. I know you went to Georgia Tech, Wes. That math does not check out. 3 of 33.
Yeah.
You don't want all
let
that.
Let me push that to my calculator, and it's not.
It's bad. It's bad. I'll tell you that. And look, I've said it a lot, so I'm gonna get out of the way and ask you, like, last night was again an outlier, and I think that the good thing about last night was that 3 guys in particular, who all are good shooters, took a lot of threes. They just happened to miss them all. Trae, Bogey, and AJ were responsible for like half the attempts last night. That's not a bad place to be. Those guys can all make shots. They all will make shots. But, they continue to be last in the league in shot profile metrics, and they're 29th in the league in three-pointers attempted and 29th in the league three-pointers made. Bogey will help, but, like, how high is on the list of things that concern you about this roster is, like, just kind of the offensive process, because we know that this team is not built to be 21st in offense, and, there are different things to get into, but how much of it is where they're shooting the ball from and kind of what they're doing on offense, like ball movement wise and system wise?
Yeah, I mean, to be completely honest, it's probably at the top of the list. When you talk about offensive process and where you're getting your shots from. I mean, I haven't looked at it recently, but yeah, I'm sure the Hawks are still 2 or top 3 in mid-range shots, and then bottom 5 in percent of shots they're taking from the 3 and percent of shots they're getting at the rim. Like there's just an upper limit with that shot that like mid-range shots. Just the math is they're just less efficient than those other two areas of the court. I mean, you can't just get to the rim. You can't just shoot threes. Like basketball doesn't work like that. You have to actually like, get there and scheme it up and, move around and shift the defense to do that. But, first of all, the reliance on the mid range is, it'll kind of lift your floor. You're able to get clean shots. I mean, honestly, the Hawks have 3 of the best mid range shooters in the game right now between Murray, Hunter, and Trae. Like, if you look at where they are relative to how the rest of the league shoots mid range jumpers, like all of them are 75th percentile and better. Like they're all up there, but the offense is still 21st. They're not taking a lot of threes. Some of it's just plain bad luck. Like you and me know, like we've watched, Trey Young his whole career. Yeah, he takes a lot of difficult threes, but he's better than a 29% shooter from 3. Like he'll improve on that. Like as time goes on, even some teams that were bad, like the 2019, 2020 Hawks teams, they were bad. They didn't have a ton of spacing, but Trey was still an all-star that year. Like there's no reason to think he can't get back to that or blame the spacing on the floor and the other players. Same with John Collins. Like he's what, a 38% shooter from 3. Like that's going to improve in time. Like there's
been some outlier stuff there. I mean, those are the 2 great examples, and Trey in general. Like I don't know, there's a whole Trey discussion we can have, but I cut you off. But it is a reminder. Like those are really the only 2 guys who are like outlier bad from 3 this year. Are Collins and Trey, but like no one's shooting well from 3, like compared to their normal baseline. Maybe AJ you could say is up there, but he's like the only one. Everybody else is like, even the Holidays are like right in the middle or below their normal averages. Like no one's making shots.
Yeah, I mean, some of that I actually pointed out this morning in the Slack discussion we're having. Like I've noticed defenses playing this Hawks team differently than years past. Like there's been a lot of zone defense. A lot of matchup zones, a lot of 2-3 zones. Some teams like Miami and Toronto have been showing the bigs that Trey when he comes off screens. But most teams, if you don't have a lot of switchable big man defenders, they're just dropping their bigs. Especially when Dejounte's coming off screens. Like Dejounte in particular is just not getting to the rim. He's shooting his career high percentage of his shots from the mid range. Like we know he loves to get to the elbow, but a lot of that's the product of teams are playing him to, hey, we'll drop our big, we'll give you that elbow jumper all day if you want, but we're gonna drop the big, we're gonna protect the paint, we're gonna chase off the good close out on the good shooters, and then we're gonna leave the Jarrett Culvers and the the Trent Forrests and the Vit Krejcis open from 3 and dare you to beat us, and the Hawks just start making them pay. Like some of that is, like I said, personnel driven. I think, like I said, teams know that the Hawks are willing to shoot a lot of mid range, turn down threes, and shoot a lot of mid range shots. So they're kind of giving it to them, and as a result, like that, they'll live in with the mid range shots, and the Hawks are turning down a lot of threes, and there's just, like I said, there's just an upper limit with that percentage of shots that you're getting from mid-range compared to the other areas of the floor that, I don't know how you feel to, like a number 2 defense, number 2 offense like the Hawks had last year. I don't know how you do that with the makeup of the roster and the schematics, the schemes that teams are throwing at them.
I want to pivot and ask you about Trey in particular, because I think the last few days, probably stemming from the now reported incident between him and Nate and him not coming to the game and all that stuff, and his sort of combative press conference that he did locally in Atlanta. I want to kind of push that to the side unless you want to bring it back up and just talk about like his basketball stuff this year, because, in addition to the poor shooting as a team, and he's part of that, Trey is having his worst season since his rookie year so far. And that's, doesn't mean it's going to happen moving forward. Like, it's not like Trey's at an age where he's going to like be declining. Like, I don't think anybody should be too worried about Trey in general, but he's not playing well. Like his effective field goal percentage is 46%. He's shooting 47% on 2s. Like, that's a really bad number for him. The passing numbers are still there. He's still a fantastic, wonderful passer. I think he's still underrated as a passer. But, I said today that I think Clint has been their MVP this year. And that's like kind of an indictment of Trey. It's also praise of Clint, but this is Trae Young's team. He's the best player on the team. And like, I don't want to overstate it. He still has a lot of value in just the way he's defended and the way he can sort of create and pass for others, but he's not having a good season. I think that is a big part of why the Hawks are not performing well. And there are reasons for it, like what you just laid out, the lack of space. That makes life harder on Trae in particular, because he is small and he is passing to guys who are just missing shots. But even individually, like, it has to be said, he's just not playing as well as he's supposed to play, and that's part of the problem.
Yeah, that's definitely part of the problem. I mean, I think, a lot of the talk was, okay, when you acquire a guy like Dejounte Murray, you need to find a way where, they both can't have the ball. You need to find a way where guys are moving out the ball or spacing the floor and playing off one another. That's still a work in progress. Obviously with Dejounte out going forward, things will have to change a little bit. But the other thing, is just, like I said, the difficulty of shots he takes. He likes to, pull from long range, and it's just, I think it's a lot of it's just, Trey's a guy who wants to. He obviously always feels like he has a chip on his shoulder. He wants to kind of prove himself. So, even when he's having a bad game, like, he still wants to, try to force the issue. I think I looked his, generally he gets to the rim well. Like you said, he's shooting 47% from two. Like, he's generally a very good finisher at the rim, but he's, last I checked, in like the bottom 5th percentile of finishers at the rim, like down there with guys like, Fred VanVleet, who never get to the rim. And
yep,
like I said, I think a lot of it is schematic. A lot of teams are packing the paint. They're coming off and, making sure they drop guys, making sure to, another thing I've noticed, a lot of help defenders. So if you're helping on a guy in the corner, I see them shading in, like, with the foot in the paint, essentially. So, Trae or whoever beats their guy, like, they're right there to help at the rim. So, I mean, I think, like I said, I think a lot of it is just kind of the process of getting used to this team. Like, they're trying to run the same scheme they always run. They're trying to run the spread pick and roll with the really high screens, but it's been difficult when, defenses are trying to take that away. The Hawks don't really have many options to counter. Generally you would like to short roll off of those screens when defenses are being aggressive and find a shooter open somewhere. But the Hawks don't really have that ability. I think I've seen kind of Trae, like you said, maybe not trust his teammates as much and try to ISO. Just like that kind of chaotic game in Houston earlier, where he and Murray were going back and forth. Like,
yeah, he and Murray decided to have a one-on-one contest in the fourth quarter of that game, which was not fantastic by anybody involved in that one. But yeah, I mean, just to, by the way, back you up, I pulled the numbers from Cleaning the Glass while you were talking about the rim numbers and stuff. He's having his worst season at the rim since he was a rookie. He's shooting 54% at the rim this year, which is down from like 56, 59, that kind of, like, he's 25th percentile at the rim this year. That's obviously not good. His floater range is still what it's always been. He's a very good floater range shooter. But the other spot, in addition to three-point range too. So three-point range, way down, rim, way down, and then his long twos are way down. Last year, he shot an unsustainably good 52% on long twos. That's like a Kevin Durant number. Like, no one shoots that other than like KD and maybe Devin Booker and Chris Paul. Like, only the elite of the elite in that range ever shoot anywhere near there. And that was kind of an outlier high for Trae, because the 2 years before that, he was in the mid-40s, which is actually still pretty good. That's still above average, mid-40s. This year, he's 38% on long twos. So, I think he's going to shoot better than that long term, just as I do from three-point range. But, like, I think it's probably some regression too, because the areas where he really, really, really exploded last year, which was, all three-point range compared to previous years, and then long twos and rim attempts, he had career highs basically in all those spots, and now they're like basically career lows. And like, the truth's in the middle somewhere, obviously, on that. But we'll see what they actually bounce back to. But it's hard for him to sustain because he is 6'1". Like, he doesn't have the same kind of pass to certain shots that someone who's 6'6" is going to have. Like, that's why his floater is so important and why it's encouraging that he's still making floaters. It's just everything else right now.
Yeah, he definitely needs to, definitely rely on the floater game. And I think, like you said, he is a good mid-range shooter. He's a good long-range shooter.
Yeah.
Some of it is just kind of, maybe a cumulative effect. Like, I think eventually things will turn around. He'll get used to that. As far as at the rim, like I said, I think defenses are kind of content to just give the Hawks as many long shots as they want. So that may not improve as much as years past, but
just way less space. I mean, it's just as simple. Like if you do the geometry of the court, if guys are not guarding his perimeter players as far out, he doesn't have as much room. And that was the underrated part of the discussion over the summer. Cause like, I know I banged the drum. I know we probably all talked about it, about like not quite having the same dynamism from shooters, from Herter to Gallo to whatever, even from Bogey until now that he's back. But that's number one, is like not having those guys making shots and taking them out there. The other part is that defenses just pack the paint on you. And like, that makes life hard, especially for someone like Trae, who's used to operating with a bunch of space. Now he has less of it. And that's, I think, part of the reason. Again, part of it's just him missing shots, but some of that has to be attributed to him just having a little bit less space and not being as comfortable. And that's just the intrinsic part of the game that you can't like say for sure. But when you're playing with Jarrett Culver and Big Krejci compared to Kevin Herter and Danilo Gallinari, like, you're being defended differently. You just are.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and like I said, it'll take some time. I mean, I think, obviously there's some understanding of, where your teammates like to be on the spots on the court and things of that nature, like that. That stuff's important, especially now with guys going in, guys going out with injury. Like, it's going to probably be even more of a process. So, like I said, I don't know if there's a way to tweak the scheme where maybe instead of doing your high pick and rolls, maybe you do more slot pick and rolls. Try to isolate him on the weak side or things of that nature. Those things can come from the coaching staff, but just something to get him more comfortable, because like I said, I think it's kind of the effect of, he's kind of frustrated. He's not playing up to his standard, and, he tends to, try to get it all back at once and things of that nature. Like, I can't really speak to what's in his head, but
no.
It definitely is not something that, something that I don't think I can just solely blame it on, just regressive shooting from deep and things of that nature. Like, I think there's probably some things that need to happen as far as, spacing the floor more from the other players, the ancillary players, and possibly even schematic, like where he starts his pick and rolls from.
Yeah, I mean, maybe if you're trying to be an optimist, which I know I'm not an optimist, although someone did say on Twitter, on YouTube today that they thought I was being paid by the Hawks to be optimistic, Wes, which I know you find that funny, knowing me pretty well.
You are a shill of the Hawks.
Yeah, it's very funny for longtime listeners that think I'm too negative. Now I'm apparently too positive for saying this guy's not indeed falling. But anyway, I think that maybe I'm not saying this as a negative at all for Trae and Dejounte, because I've actually said those guys, and it's still the case, when they play together, the numbers are still pretty good. It's when they're not playing together, the numbers have kind of fallen off this year. But maybe Trae gets comfortable because they might just go back to more of what they used to run, which is like Trae, one dive man, and spacing. Especially now that Bogey's back, they can put some lineups out there with Bogey and AJ and Trae, and that's more like what it used to be like for Trae, like schematic wise, and also just like geometry wise on the court. So maybe that gets him going a little bit in the next couple of games. I know he missed practice today. I guess he wasn't feeling great in New York. So but he's not on the injury report. So I assume he's going to play on Friday unless it gets worse. We'll see how that all goes. But yeah, long story short, I think he's going to make shots. We agree on that. How many he makes and how quickly he starts to make them was pretty important when trying to evaluate this Hawks team. I do want to, before we get out of here, I do want to at least take a second, because of all of the doom and gloom, to just like ask you one thing, Wes, and that is, name something, anything in the world that's gone well for the Hawks this year. What's gone well?
I think the easy answer is having AJ Griffin fall to 16 to them. Like,
that helps.
I think we both agree. Like, I had AJ well into the top 10. I think I had him maybe kind of 8th, just doing my rudimentary scouting of some of the draft prospects coming in the draft. So seeing him at 16, I know there was some injury, some health issues, and he didn't look super explosive at Duke, especially defensively. But you knew he could shoot it. You knew he had a little bit of a handle and things of that nature. And Hawks grabbed him. He's ramped up, and now he's like at a crucial part of the rotation. If you look at any rookie rankings, pretty common to see him in the top 5 of best rookies in the NBA. Decent chance he makes, rookie first team. So to get a guy like that, 16th, like I said, you need those wins from the discussion we had earlier. Like, you need those wins to be able to really turn out guys in the middle to lower part of the first round. Certainly it's early in his rookie season, so you can't really sing his praises too high. But I think it's looking like a big win, looking like a big steal on draft day, and it looks like he'll be like a really important part of the Hawks going forward, not just this season, but provide them some spacing that they desperately need, among other things.
Yeah, I think that is the correct answer. If you're trying to list like the most positive organizational thing for this season, it is the drafting and development and early signs of Dejounte Griffin. I agree with that. I mean, other than that, like you're looking at, I think the way Clint's played would be high on the list. I think Clint looking like he has looked is encouraging for if the rest of the team figures it out, they have that to work with, because we've kind of all said this, but the best version of the Hawks kind of has to include Clint being awesome, because they built the entire thing around him defensively, and he's a big part of why they're above average defensively this year. I mean, the list though is not that long, honestly. Like I was trying to like list some stuff that was like actually good this year. I think the defense in general, you could say, has probably been a positive because they're above average. Like last year, they were truly terrible for like most of the season defensively, like
right.
Truly bad. And now I don't think they're good with a capital G on defense, but they're like solid defensively. Now, without Hunter and Collins both, probably not going to be very good. But as long as if Hunter's back soon, they're better off with Hunter defensively. There's a whole conversation about his offense, but I think defensively he definitely helps them. And we've seen that when they have their guys, their defense has been pretty good. And, just not to go down the negative path, but there's a ceiling on this defense because of the personnel. Like if you have Trae in particular, and then even guys like Bogey, he's kind of lost a step defensively, like they can't be elite defensively, I don't think. But if they're pretty good, that's like a pretty big win overall. And I think a lot of that goes to Clinton, maybe some John. I think Clinton number one, and then Collins number two on that in terms of like just value defensively list, and Hunter somewhere in there too.
Yeah, that's important. I mean, John Collins, like, past couple of years, like when you compare especially his defense to his first years in the league, it's been pretty stark. Like he's legitimately one of the better defensive fours in basketball. I know. Obviously his offense has fallen off a little bit this year, but I think that'll rebound. But that's like I said, you pulled the numbers, and John Collins, Clint Capella front court is great in net rating. It's especially great in defensive rating given up. So I mean that's the solid foundation. That's kind of what you need again when you have, like you said, obviously a small guard in Trae. Even Dejounte's 6'4", he's got a big wingspan. But when you build a team around two small guards, like you've got to have that front line kind of be able to cover from them if they're giving up rim penetration, like so that I would say obviously Capella's having a fantastic year defensively, but him plus John Collins plus DeAndre Hunter, who's still solid defensively, like that's something that I think is sustainable. That's something that I think they can sustain throughout the whole year. They may not be top 10 defense, but definitely very good chance. I think they'll be above average defensively.
Yeah, I'll give you my favorite number on that front to be positive again. Of all of the two-man lineups, so basically these two guys are together on the court. The Hawks have a bunch of lineups that have played at least 200 minutes together of two different players. The best two-man lineup that the Hawks have this year is Capella and Collins. They're plus 5.9 net rating with Collins and Capella on the court. 107 defensive rating, which is very, very, very good. And for all the talk about how those guys don't fit together for the last 3 years, they just always seem to play well when they have Collins and Capella on the court. And it's mostly defensively, and it'd be helpful if John made some jump shots when he comes back. But like that has definitely worked out for sure. Listen, I think we painted a not a terribly grim picture on this podcast, but it's a realistic one. I do want to, before we go, this will be the last thing. I promise I will not take any more of your time. The injury stuff is what it is. We have to see how they navigate it. There is a little bit of a schedule respite coming next week. And of course, as soon as I said that, Hawks fans were like, well, does it even matter who they play? Because they've lost to some bad teams recently. And I get that, but they do have a run with it's like 6 games in a row where they play like Houston and Orlando, and it's really soft. Detroit's in there. That should give you a little bit of optimism. I'm going to ask you this now, Wes, like compared to where we were let's say 2 months ago when the season was starting? I'm assuming you don't feel quite as good because most people don't, but how much has your opinion changed and like what's your outlook looking like? Taking everything into account, like knowing that Murray's gonna be out for 2 weeks at least, Collins another week and a half or so at least. Like, how are you feeling? Is this a play-in team? Like, where's your projection looking as of December 8th with 57 games to go?
Yeah, I would definitely say about a play-in team. I mean, like I said, I think things will get better. Like, I think the shooting will regress to some degree. Like, they're just just kind of has to. This is actually like, long range shooting is kind of one of the last things that regresses during a season. So, and obviously the injuries. I mean, put a little bit more of a silver lining on it. Like, the injuries to Collins and Murray, kind of knock on wood, they're considered short term injuries. Like they'll be back within 2 weeks or so. Like you don't have any like long term injuries hanging over them that this guy's going to miss half a season. Hopefully so. They have a chance to actually get really healthy. Maybe they just kind of tread water. Like you said, they're playing an easier part of schedule the next 2 weeks or so that they can tread water, kind of work out some of these issues and go from there. Like they've essentially done this the past 2 seasons where they started out middling. Well, 2 seasons ago they started out pretty poor. A lot of that was kind of collapses in the fourth quarter, but they were pretty middling last year. They had a bunch of COVID illnesses, so turned it around, got into the playoffs, had to go through the play-in. That's probably something I would look towards this year. Like there's still a lot of talent on this team. Like I don't think you can convince me that this is not one of the better talented teams in the NBA in the East. Like it's definitely top half as far as just pure talent. So when you just kind of rely on that talent, like you said, you've got a star player in Trey Young. He's been a 2-time All-Star. You got Murray. He's been an All-Star. Like you feel like eventually they'll figure it out. It's a long season. So I think right now you're looking at the play-in, but it wouldn't really surprise me if they kind of clicked and turned it on the second half, just because they've done that the past 2 seasons.
Yeah, and that's, I think, instructive. And I certainly do not feel as positively now as I did even a week or 2 ago, honestly, versus 2 months ago, just because of the injuries and some of the losses that they've piled up against like teams they should, like that Houston loss is a bad one. There's been some bad ones along the way. OKC is not a great loss on Monday, etc. But like even now, like let's say as an example, 538 as of tonight has the Hawks with a 76% chance to make the playoffs, and that's the top 8 by the end. So part of that's playing and all that. But like that's seems reasonable to me. I think there are at least 5 teams, maybe 6 teams that I think are like solidly better than the Hawks right now in the East in terms of projection because of all the injuries the Hawks have. And then you get into that groove with, what's Miami this year? I have no idea. Miami's not playing super well. There's still like space to your point about the Hawks. Like if they just get right for a few weeks, there's an easy path to the 7th seed, if nothing else, something like that. So, it's been a roller coaster. I don't think that anybody's feeling fantastic, and that includes the Hawks. Like they don't seem to be super happy to bring things full circle. The fan base is not happy. The Hawks are not super happy right now, but they're definitely in just like hold the line mode. Like steal a win or 2 with Collins and Murray out. I don't know if Friday's the one that I would pick, but even then, like that's a winnable game. They're underdogs for sure, and rightfully so in Brooklyn against the full strength Nets. But like obviously the Nets are not the most like picture of consistency either. So if they don't show up, if the Hawks finally have one good shooting night, that'd be very helpful. Bogey's back. That definitely helps things. We should mention that. Again, he's not shooting well so far, but like I have no concern about Bogey making shots. So him being there is very helpful too. So we'll see. And I don't know, Wes. I don't know what we accomplished in the last 45 minutes, but basically the Hawks are hovering around 500 and nobody's thrilled. There you go.
We gave them a mixed picture there, but
Well, that's what it is. It's a mixed picture. That's the real picture.
So then we gave them a good picture of it.
We did. We absolutely provided that. All right. Well, thank you for all the time, Wes. Please plug yourself. If people are not watching on YouTube, they can't see this, but if they are, you can see Wes's Twitter handle on the screen. But share with people, Wes, and where you're writing. And I know you're active at Peachtree Hoops and all that fun stuff.
Yeah. Follow me on Twitter at BlogHawk. Try to tweet along. If not, I'm tweeting at the Peachtree Hoops account most game days. I'm also, of course, writing at Peachtree Hoops, so be sure to visit the website. And be sure to follow me. And long season. We still got a long way to go, and hope you stay tuned to the Hawks.
Long season for sure. I will say this: after Sunday's game, which is the Hawks are back at home against Chicago, that's the 1/3 mark of the season. That's game 27. That's the 1/3 mark. So sometimes Saturday, I guess Sunday night will be like the third mark of the season. So there's still a long way to go. 57 more games. Buckle up.
It's funny because it felt like the season had just started, but then the past couple of weeks, it felt like everything's just dragged on, like the season's taking forever. Like this is how it switches.
We're into December, and that's part of the fun. All right. Well, thank you, Wes, for being here. I definitely encourage everybody to check out Wes's work and also the whole crew over at Peachtree Hoops, where I no longer work, but I still support at a high level. Please follow this podcast across platforms. Subscribe, Apple Podcast, Spotify, Stitcher, Odyssey, Google Play, all those places, as well as YouTube. Follow me if you'd like to on Twitter at BT Rowland. Follow the old Patreon at patreon.com/BT Rowland. And thank you for listening. We'll see you all after the game on Friday.